I'm writing this from a first-class seat on a plane to the Maldives, a trip that was supposed to be my honeymoon but is now my solo victory lap. My phone has been blowing up for the last 12 hours with apologies from people I cut out of my life yesterday. But before I block them all, I need to tell the world exactly how I burned my own wedding to the ground. To understand the level of betrayal, you have to understand the players. There was Mark, my fiancé of 4 years, the man I thought was my soulmate. Then there was Jessica, my maid of honor. Jessica and I weren't just friends. We were sisters in every way that mattered. We met in kindergarten, went to the same college, and she was the one who introduced me to Mark. She was the person I trusted most in the world. Yesterday morning was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The bridal suite was chaos in the best way possible. There was champagne flowing, hairspray everywhere, and Jessica was right there by my side, steaming my veil and calming my nerves. She looked genuinely happy for me. She hugged me tight and told me how beautiful I looked. The betrayal happened exactly 1 hour before the ceremony. The bridesmaids had left the room to get lined up for photos, leaving me alone for a moment of peace. Mark had stopped by the suite earlier to drop off a gift and had accidentally left his personal phone on the vanity table. He had a work phone he usually carried, so he probably didn't even realize the personal one was missing. I wasn't snooping. I swear on my life I wasn't suspicious. I just wanted to check the time because the wall clock was broken. I tapped the screen to wake it up. That was the moment my life ended and restarted in the span of 10 seconds. A text notification was sitting right there on the lock screen. It was from Jessica. The preview showed the entire message. It said that she was pregnant with their baby. It said that she couldn't watch him marry me knowing she was carrying his child. It demanded that he tell me the truth before the ceremony began, or she would do it herself. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. The room started spinning. I unlocked the phone. His passcode was literally my birthday, and scrolled up. It wasn't a drunk mistake. It wasn't a one-night stand. The messages went back 6 months. They were talking about love, about how boring I was compared to her, and about how they were going to use my father's money to pay for the wedding before. Mark eventually divorced me a year later. They were mocking me. They were laughing at how stupid I was for planning a wedding to a man who was sleeping with my best friend. I sank to the floor in my $5,000 dress. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the dress off and run out the back door. I wanted to curl up and die. But then something cold washed over me. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror. My makeup was flawless. My hair was perfect. My father had spent a fortune on this venue, the catering and the open bar. If I canceled the wedding right then, I would be the pitiable victim. I would be the sad girl who got cheated on. Mark and Jessica would get to spin the narrative. They would say they fell in love and couldn't help it. They would make me look like the obstacle to their true love. No, that wasn't going to happen. I stood up and wiped the single tear that had escaped. I touched up my powder. I looked at the phone one last time and took screenshots of everything. I sent them to my own phone, then deleted the evidence of the transfer. I put his phone back exactly where he left it. I decided right then and there that the wedding would go on. I was going to walk down that aisle. I was going to say my vows. I was going to let them think they had gotten away with a perfect crime. I was going to wait until the reception. I was going to wait until every single person they knew and respected was in the room, watching us. I wasn't just going to cancel a wedding. I was going to execute a public execution of their reputations. I opened the door, flashed a bright smile at my mother who was walking down the hall, and prepared for the performance of a lifetime. Walking down the aisle was the hardest acting performance of my life. I had to lock eyes with Mark, the man who had been mocking me behind my back for months, and pretend I was the happiest woman alive. I had to stand next to Jessica, who was holding my bouquet and fixing my train, knowing she was carrying my fiancé's child. Every time she touched my arm or smiled at me, my skin crawled. I said my vows without stuttering. I promised to love and cherish him, but internally I was promising to destroy him. When the priest pronounced us husband and wife, I kissed him. It wasn't a kiss of love. It was the kiss of death. I needed the marriage license signed just to make the humiliation official, even though I knew I would be annulling it the very next day. The reception began, and the atmosphere was electric. Everyone was drinking, dancing, and celebrating our love. Mark looked relieved. He clearly thought he had gotten away with it. He probably thought Jessica had chickened out of her threat to tell me. He was loosening his tie, laughing with his groomsmen, and acting like the king of the world. Then came the speeches. The best man gave a drunk, rambling speech about college days. Then it was Jessica's turn. I knew she couldn't resist the spotlight. Jessica had always been jealous of me, and today, seeing me as the center of attention was killing her. She tapped the microphone to silence the room. She started talking about how much she loved us, but then she pivoted. She made the speech entirely about herself. She started crying fake tears and announced that she had been blessed with a miracle. She told the entire room of 200 guests that she was pregnant. The room gasped and then erupted into applause. My family, Mark's family, and our mutual friends were all cheering for her. She basked in it, rubbing her barely there bump, stealing my wedding day thunder exactly as she planned. Mark looked terrified. He knew the timing was suspicious. He was staring at her with wide eyes, silently begging her to stop talking. That was my cue. I stood up and gently took the microphone from her hand. I put my arm around her waist, pulling her close like a loving sister. I thanked her for sharing such incredible news. I told the crowd that since we were sharing secrets, I had a special surprise gift for the happy couple Jessica and Mark. I signaled the AV technician at the back of the room. I had slipped him $100 bill in a USB drive during the cocktail hour with very specific instructions to override the pre-planned photo montage. The lights dimmed. The huge projector screen behind the head table flickered to life. Instead of cute photos of Mark and me dating, a massive high-definition screenshot appeared. It was the text thread from Mark's phone. The silence in the room was instant and violent. The first slide showed Jessica's text from that morning explicitly stating she was pregnant with his baby and demanding he leave me. The next slide showed Mark's replies from last week, calling me boring and oblivious and joking about how they were using my father's money to pay for the party before he dumped me. The final slide was the ultrasound photo she had sent him, date stamped and undeniable. You could hear a pin drop. The cheering had turned into a collective intake of breath. My mother gasped so loud it echoed. Mark's face drained of all color. He looked like a ghost. Jessica tried to grab the microphone back, but I held onto it tight. I spoke clearly into the mic. I told the room that the baby Jessica just announced was actually Mark's. I told them that I hoped they were happy together. Then I delivered the final blow. I turned to Mark and informed him that since he was so fond of spending money that wasn't his, he should know that my father had just called the venue owner 5 minutes ago. I announced that the check covering the reception, the catering, and the open bar had been cancelled. I told him the $50,000 bill for the party was now entirely in his name and due immediately. I dropped the microphone on the table. It made a loud screech that made everyone flinch. I didn't look back. I grabbed my purse, walked off the stage, and marched straight out the double doors of the ballroom. Behind me, I heard my father shouting at Mark, Mark's mother screaming at Jessica, and the sound of 200 people realizing they were witnessing a complete social massacre. I walked out into the cool night air, hailed the Uber I had pre-booked, and headed straight for the airport. The ride to the airport was the most surreal experience of my life. My phone was vibrating nonstop in my purse, lighting up with calls from Mark, Jessica, his mother, and half the bridal party. I didn't answer a single one. I just watched the city lights blur past the window and felt a weight lift off my chest that I hadn't realized was there. I later learned from my cousin, who stayed behind to watch the fireworks, that the aftermath was even more chaotic than I imagined. After I walked out, the venue manager immediately cut the music and approached the head table, since my father had formally retracted his payment card just minutes before my announcement. The venue required immediate settlement of the $50,000 bill to continue the service or even to let the guests leave without legal involvement. Mark, who was currently unemployed and drowning in credit card debt, obviously couldn't pay it. His parents apparently tried to argue that it wasn't their responsibility, but the contract had a clause about liability that Mark had foolishly signed during the planning phase. The police were eventually called to mediate the dispute over the bill. My father, being the petty king that he is, stood by the door and told everyone exactly why he wasn't paying for a party, celebrating a cheater. Jessica didn't fare any better. According to my cousin, she tried to run after me but was blocked by my bridesmaids, the same girls who had been fixing Her hair hours earlier were now looking at her with pure disgust. She ended up locking herself in the bridal suite bathroom, crying hysterically while Mark's mother banged on the door, screaming at her for ruining her son's life and reputation. The social fallout was instantaneous. By the time I got through TSA security, half the guests had already posted about the drama on social media. The video of me dropping the mic and the photos of the text messages were circulating in our local community groups. Mark and Jessica were not just exposed, they were viral pariahs. I boarded my flight to the Maldives an hour ago. I upgraded my ticket to first class using the points Mark had been saving for himself. The flight attendant just handed me a glass of vintage champagne. It tastes significantly better than the cheap sparkling wine at the wedding would have. I have already instructed my lawyer to file for an annulment based on fraud, since the marriage was never consummated and based on the deception regarding the pregnancy. He assures me it will be a quick process. I will get to keep the ring, which I plan to sell to fund a new wardrobe. Mark is currently homeless, jobless, and facing a massive lawsuit from the wedding venue for the unpaid bill. Jessica is pregnant, disgraced, and stuck with a man who has absolutely nothing to offer her but debt and shame. They deserve each other. As for me, I have 2 weeks in a private overwater bungalow to figure out my next move. I turned off my phone, blocked every single number associated with Mark and Jessica, and leaned back in my seat. I might have lost a husband and a best friend today, but I regained my self-respect. And honestly, looking at the menu for this flight, I think I got the better deal.